Good morning. So a few weeks ago, before Christmas, I shared a illustration in a sermon about our family getting a new dishwasher, and I was talking about preparing the way for God to come into our lives. You had to prepare the way for something new to come in your life. A lot of people asked after that sermon, is there more to that story, Matt? And I will tell you, yes, there is. And I said, I'm going to save it for another sermon. Well, guess what? Today is that sermon. I'm going to tell you the rest of the story because it was the week before Thanksgiving. We had guests coming, family coming for Thanksgiving dinner on Thursday. So it's Sunday night. My wife and I are out shopping for a new dishwasher because the old one broke. And so we're shopping for a new one. We got figured out, there's so many models out there, the routine. We find one, and then they don't have it in stock. So they assured me that this could get delivered by Tuesday, and I could pick it up on Tuesday. And then I figured, okay, well, I don't have a meeting Tuesday night at church, so I can install it on Tuesday night, because when they told me the delivery and installation charge of $160, I said, no, I'll do it myself. I'm a frugal person, and I said, I got this under control. I can handle this, right? And so Tuesday night comes, Thursday's Thanksgiving. I go to the store, pick up the dishwasher, get home, take out the old dishwasher, then realize that I didn't have all the parts that I needed for the new dishwasher to be installed that the salesperson didn't tell me I needed. I'm already looking for somebody to blame. So I get the new part, I get the other parts to hook up the dishwasher. I start hooking up the new dishwasher. I get it all, everything's going along well. But there's this part of installing a dishwasher where you have to run, all the water that runs a dishwasher runs out of a hose and it goes into the garbage disposal under your sink. So I have to get under the sink. Now I'm almost 6'2". I won't tell you how much I weigh. But if you can imagine me trying to contort myself underneath the kitchen sink, there's two sinks, disposal there, and I've got to run a hose through some ties around the upper part of the back of the sink and then into the garbage disposal. And so I'm running it, tying it up, fixing it. I get it all the way onto the garbage disposal. I put it on there. I get a heavy-duty clamp. I clamp it down. I think I'm done. And then pop goes the hose off of the garbage disposal. Not only did it pop off, but it came all undone all the way back to the beginning. But did I tell you I'm like underneath the sink like this? I got I'm only working with one arm because this arm's stuck up against the cabinet, and you're trying to figure out, and I keep hitting my head against things, and so my frustration level is beginning to rise. So I'm under there, and sure enough, I start to run it again and get it back hooked up. And I'm frustrated at this point, but I get it all hooked up, and I just crank that clamp down even harder. And guess what happens? It pops off again. So at this point, I'm under the sink, and I reach what I call the tipping point, which is whatever you're filled up with at that moment starts to come out. You reach that tipping point, and stuff inside of you starts to spill out. Now, my wife started to recognize this happening and starts to leave the kitchen as I reach the tipping point, because she knows what's about to come out, right? And so I'm about to spill out all this stuff, and I'm biting my tongue and all these things. One of the things that's going on inside of me is I'm looking for somebody to blame. Maybe that's why she left. Maybe she thought, I don't want to get the blame for this. I didn't break the dishwasher, but that would have been an easy thing to do, wouldn't it? To place blame. Well, if my wife hadn't broke the dishwasher, I didn't do that. I didn't go down that road. But we start looking, when we're frustrated and angry, we start looking for someone to blame. And I thought, well, if that salesman had just told me the right things, I wanted to blame the salesman. Or if the engineers who designed this dishwasher hosing would have done a better job, right? I'm looking for somebody to blame. Or I wanted to blame the dishwasher, this inanimate object. Right? But when I step back and look at that incident, in fact, anybody ever tried to install anybody have this kind of experience in your life? It doesn't have to be a dishwasher, but something that just gets you to your tipping point? Yes. And I realized something that Jesus was teaching in the gospel lesson. That this had nothing to do with the engineers of the dishwasher. It had nothing to do with my wife. It had nothing to do with the dishwasher itself. It had nothing to do with the salesperson in the store. It had nothing to do with anything out there, external. It had everything to do with what was going on inside of my heart. It had everything to do with what was going on inside of me. That's what Jesus said when he was talking and he was teaching his disciples. He was using this opportunity as a teachable moment. And he says this, "For from within, out of a person's heart, come evil thoughts, sexual immorality, theft, murder, adultery, greed, wickedness, deceit, lustful desires, envy, slander, pride, and foolishness. All these vile things come from within. They are what defile you." And that's the moment I realized it was what was inside that was the issue. It was what was inside that was the problem. Now, as I look back on it, hindsight's always 20/20, and I think about some of the thought processes I was having before I even got there. One thing that was going on before I even got to the dishwasher episode was pride. When I heard $160 to install the dishwasher and deliver it, I said, I got this I can do it myself. I don't need your help, right? Plus, I didn't want to pay $160, right? I wanted to say I didn't want to do that. That's a part of that. But there was a part of me that said, I can do this myself. I don't need anybody else's help, right? I know what I'm doing. There's a sense of pride going on there. So pride was setting me up. That's one of the things that Jesus mentioned. The other thing that was going on was I was also setting myself up by the way I was thinking about it even before I got to it. I had already been thinking, I don't have time for this. This is an inconvenience. There's too much going on this week. I am too busy. I'm starting to have all these thoughts even from the beginning that the first dishwasher broke. I'm beginning to set myself up by the way I'm thinking to be frustrated. And then the other thing I would say is not only those things, but as I was the contortionist underneath the sink, there was a thought that ran through my head, and it's a thought that each of you have had as well, or will have. And it was this thought: I am just like my father. Because from the very time I was a very young child, I had seen my father react to inanimate objects, whatever they were, dishwashers, washing machines, automobiles, whatever it was. I had seen him get frustrated, and I watched him, and I had learned a response from my father. My guess is that each of us have learned responses. All of us have those thoughts. We set ourselves up for this. That we all do these things because there's this thing called pride within us. And all these other desires connect into that. And it's really about the condition of our hearts that makes all this stuff come out. That there's something going on inside of us. In fact, Jesus was arguing with the Pharisees because what were the Pharisees doing? They had actually intentionally come with the purpose of pointing out the flaws of Jesus. It says that in the text, that they came to confront him, to show him how he wasn't doing it the right way. We don't ever do that right. We don't ever say to somebody else, you're not doing it the right way. Do it this way. And so the Pharisees came to tell Jesus he wasn't doing it the right way. His disciples weren't doing it the right way. They were frustrated with Jesus because he wasn't doing things the way they wanted him to do it. And then he points out their flaw, their hypocrisy, and he says, he actually calls them hypocrites, and he says, there's hypocrisy in what you're saying. Part of what he was pointing out, and he teaches his disciples, is they had all these ceremonies and traditions about getting ready to put food into your body, into your stomach. Interestingly enough, I won't go into detail about this, they didn't think anything that came out of the human body was unclean. So Jesus was pointing out to them, look, you go through all this to deal with the stuff that goes into your body and say it's clean, but you don't do anything or say anything about what's coming out of your body, and you call that clean. He said, this doesn't make sense. This is a man-made tradition. This is a skewed way of looking at things. And what he was saying is, what you're doing is you're not addressing what's in your own hearts. See, when you focus on the outside, when you focus on the external, when you focus on what other people are doing, you don't ever look at what's going on inside of here. And that's always the temptation, isn't it? To say it's somebody else's fault, to blame somebody else, to put it on somebody else, because as long as I'm doing that, as long as I'm externalizing it or putting it on the dishwasher, then I don't have to deal with what's in here. I don't have to take a look inside. Jeremiah, the prophet Jeremiah, you're not going to want to hear this because Jeremiah is a prophet. We don't like prophets because they speak truth. Here's what Jeremiah said. He said, "The human heart is the most deceitful of all things and desperately wicked. Who really knows how bad it is? Who really knows how bad it is? Who really wants to know how bad it is?" We don't think of it that way. We want to isolate ourselves from taking a look there because we might find out that there's something wrong, and we don't want to do that. A couple years ago, I was having some chest pains and some discomfort, and I thought, acid reflux. I thought, maybe something's going on there, maybe, stress or whatever. So my wife made me go to the doctor. Notice how I blame her. See how I do it? See how easy it is to go there? So I said, I'll go to the doctor. So I go and I get a test. And the doctor looks at the I think it was the EKG, and he says, "Look, there's something on here. I don't know what it is, but I want to run another test. I want you to get it checked out." I said, "All right, so no big deal." So I schedule a stress test, and then I go for the stress test. And the stress test results come back, and there's still something there that they're seeing that's just something that's amiss, that's not looking right. So doctor says, "You need to go see a cardiologist." So I find a good cardiologist. Go to the cardiologist with the blood work and the test results, and I'm, thinking it's stress, thinking it's a stomach thing, thinking, whatever. I'm downplaying it. I'm figuring out a way to make it look not that bad. And the doctor sits there and he says to me, "Look, there's something going on here. I'm not going to be able to tell you what's really going on unless I go in and take a look." And I said, "Well, I don't think I need that. That's not, And what he meant was I need to do a heart catheterization. I need to run something up, go into the wrist and go into your artery and look inside your heart." And I said, No, I'm good. I'm all right. I don't want anybody poking around in there. What if you mess up, that kind of thing, And he's like, "Really, the only way we're going to know is if we go in and take a look." So, go home, talk it over with your wife. I knew what my wife was going to say, that kind of thing, right? So we went home, talked it over, and I hemmed and hawed, and I put it off, and I finally said, I'll go. So I scheduled it, and they went in, and they ran in, and they took a look, and they found out. I'm just telling you this is not the illustration because I know you're going to ask me. Is that they found that I had the beginning stages of heart disease, and they found one of the parts of my artery starting to get blocked up. The good news is they didn't have to put any stents in or anything like that. So I went to my follow-up appointment, and the doctor said, "Here we're going to give you this medication that you're going to be on for the rest of your life, and you're going to do two things. You're going to eat well and exercise." You guys been to the cardiologist too, right? Oh, man. So basically what he was saying was you have to develop some heart-healthy habits to help your heart now that you've seen what's inside. Folks, as you and I look inside of our hearts, there are also some heart-healthy habits that we'll talk about through this series that we need to develop that will keep our hearts healthy. But we have to be willing to take a look. Now, I'm going to say this. This is a great temptation that I know you're struggling with right now, because it's my temptation as I prepare these sermons. And I'm assuming it's your temptation. Your temptation right now is to sit here and think, "I am so glad so-and-so is here today to hear this." Some of you are ready to elbow your spouse and say, "Hey, listen to this." But as long as you're doing that, guess what you're not doing? You're not looking at your own heart, right? You're not looking at the inside. Thanks, Paul. You're not looking at the inside because you're focused on somebody else's heart. So here's what I want to ask you to do through this series. Take your eyes off of other people's hearts. Stop comparing other people's hearts and start looking at your own heart. Start to just be open to seeing what's inside of you. And then we'll talk about that. I'll actually reveal some more of Matt's heart, and you'll get some other illustrations about what's going on inside of my heart to help you understand what's going on inside of yours. So we're going to talk about that because we have this great way of deceiving ourselves about what's inside our heart. That's what Jeremiah said. So we're going to be talking about the anatomy of a toxic heart the next few weeks. So here's some of the topics. I could run this series out for weeks, couldn't I? But we're going to deal with the next 3 weeks, we're going to deal with three things. The first thing is we're going to look at discontentment. Discontentment is saying, I'm not getting what I want. At the heart of discontentment is the thought or the evil desire or the evil thought or the vile thought that Jesus says of pride. Pride's at the center of that. I'm not getting what I want. Pride's a part of that. Greed is also a part of that. We tend to hide. We think we're not greedy, but as we unpack this, we might see that we have some more greed in our lives than we think. So pride and greed are a part of that. And then that leads to this feeling, this emotional response of discontentment because of these thoughts. And then the other thing, the way we deceive ourselves is that we mask it, right? We can take this feeling of discontentment or this pride and this greed, and we can mask it or disguise it as something good. And what we sometimes disguise it as value. I need to be valued. Now, being valued and being loved is a very worthy thing. It's a healthy thing. Yet we can disguise some other things that aren't healthy as something healthy. And that's the deception, the heart's deception. That's how that works. So sometimes we hide that pride and greed behind a statement like, I need to be valued, or I need to be significant. I need other people to treat me as significant and valued. And so I'm not getting what I want is what is really at the heart of that. The other thing is, the next week we'll look at anger. Anger is, I want to get even, or I want to be paid back. Somebody's hurt me. I want to get even with them. I want to get paid back. They owe me something. And so I'm going to work and do stuff to get that paid back to me or to get even with that person. And so Jesus actually says murder, slander. Talks about murder and slander. Pride, again, is at the center of this one. You'll notice that pride is at the center of a lot of these. But murder and slander, because Jesus also taught that if you want to hurt somebody, if you want to get rid of someone, if you want to erase them from the planet or get them out of your life, that's a motive of hatred or a motive of anger. And he says, if you're even thinking that, you've already committed murder in your heart, he says. Not even though you haven't physically done anything to them, you've already done that in your heart towards that person. And so he points out again that is a heart issue. And so sometimes, though, we hide behind, so we take this anger and this malice, this slanderous malice attitude, and then we disguise it and we say, I need justice. So we take something very good like justice and seeking justice, which is a good thing, and we hide it behind that, or we say it's really seeking justice when in reality it's really about our own anger and pride. So that's the way we can deceive ourselves. And then the last one, the third week, we'll talk about jealousy, which is I deserve better. Somebody else gets a promotion at work. We don't get it, but we feel we work just as hard or just as worthy of that promotion, but we just didn't get it. So we think I'm more worthy than that person thinks, and so we get jealous of that promotion. Or our sister that can wear skinny jeans and we can't wear skinny jeans, and we envy her. Jesus calls it envy because they can wear something that we'd like to wear. That's jealousy. That's envy coming out of us. And that's that I deserve. It really is about I deserve. I deserve something better. I deserve to be able to do that because it's about self-worth. And so again, we take those thoughts of envy and pride and we hide them behind an issue of self-worth or of something of that nature or self-esteem. And so we can hide those real deep, darker attitudes and thoughts behind something that's very good. Now, I would note at this point in all three of those areas that it is good to be valued and loved. It is good to seek justice. And it is good to have self-worth and self-esteem. Those are all good things. But what we'll see is that sometimes we hide the reality, the truth about our hearts behind things that are good because that's the way we want to manage and present it to other people. Does that make sense to people? So sometimes we do that. We'll unpack that more. So we'll talk about that. So bottom line today is, what do you do now? If that toxicity is in you, if there's something toxic in you, how do you keep it from spilling out on other people? Because we know that when it spills out, what happens? It damages relationships. It hurts relationships. It hurts other people because what happens when I'm toxic and have toxicity in my life and I dump it out on somebody else, what does it do to them, right? It creates toxicity sometimes in them, and that can create what we call a toxic relationship. So how do I stop spilling this toxic stuff out into my relationships, into my families, into the world, into my workplace, wherever it is? How do I stop that from happening? And so what we tend to do is let's go back to the dishwasher. What had happened is that the toxicity level just kept going up and up and up and up, right? To the point where just it took one little thing, right? And it spilled out, right? We say all it took was one straw that broke the camel's back, or I reached my tipping point, or I had enough. We say things like that. That's what we're saying. Is so what we tend to do, if I'm only half full, and somebody bumps into me or knocks into me, I can kind of stop it from coming out, So even when I was under the sink there, right, and my wife was in the room, what I was doing was not only managing, I was filtering what was coming out. I didn't say anything bad. But all the thoughts running through my head were toxic. I would say they were things that you would not want to hear your pastor say, right? So what did I do? And because my wife was standing, if my wife was standing in a room with me, I started to filter them, right? And so I said things like, fudge. What am I doing? I'm filtering what's coming out. I'm trying to manage what's really in my heart, right? And so that's what we do all the time. And so we're always constantly trying to manage this, trying to filter it and come out because we want to, we don't want people to really know what's in there. So here's the thing. What if you could actually change what's inside? What if you could change what's inside your heart? Because if you could change what's inside your heart, you don't have to worry so much about filtering, managing. You don't worry as much about what's coming out of it. So what you could do, what if you introduce something else to the condition of your heart? And I would say what we believe and our faith, we put our faith in, is in God's grace and love in Jesus Christ. And when we allow God's love and grace to be poured into us, it changes us. It changes the condition of our heart. It changes what's on the inside. How much grace do we need? A lot, right? Come on, stay with me here. A lot, as much as we can get, right? And it starts to change the condition of our heart. So that now, whatever's inside of us, if somebody bumps into us, something happens, what spills out of us is something different than jealousy or discontentment or envy or pride or greed or anger. And then, once God changes our heart by God's grace, then we also have to develop the healthy habits, the healthy heart habits that change us and keep that heart condition going in a healthy way. And I will talk about how gratitude and forgiveness and joy are the healthy habits. So what would it look like for you and me that when things happen, out spilled out gratitude, or out spilled out forgiveness, or what came out of us was joy rather than jealousy? Wouldn't that be awesome? Wouldn't that be great? I believe that can happen. Amen.